is your end all? Is there a be all and end all for the well-being scientist, Karli?
I kind of view it as like, what kind of community do I want to build and like how do I want to get there? So like one thing that I'm building is the Wellbeing Mentorship Network, as you know. What I love is that, yes, we are having more conversations about diversity. And I saw a quote. It was like, there's one thing to promote diversity, but it's actually unsafe when you are promoting diversity and you're getting these diverse people in higher positions, but yet we don't provide an infrastructure or policies or programs that actually allow them to thrive, that allow them to move up in the ranks. And so it's like, oh, we're all talk about diversity, but are we at the points when our institutions or structures are actually ready?
Welcome back, everybody. This is the All of You podcast, the podcast where we sit down with all of you. And today we are extending the olive branch to none other than the well-being scientist, Karli. Karli, what's up, girl? Welcome to the All of You podcast.
Oh, this is great. This is surreal. This is my first podcast experience. So I am honored. I'm very grateful to be here.
I am very grateful that you're here. And you know, it's funny because I creeped you on the internet and I came across a post of yours on Instagram that said something like, I'm not a podcast girly. And I was like, she hasn't been on any podcasts yet? I'm going to message her and see if she will be on the podcast. So can you maybe tell the audience, our listeners, a little bit about maybe what drew me to you? Because we were talking in the car here about the reel that drew me to you. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the development of that reel and why that reel was so important to you. Because I think that's sort of the starting point of how I came to know who you are. So yeah.
I can try my best. So it's called I Don't Need Therapy. And it was a very polarizing video, I think, for so many people. But honestly, it got a lot of positive reaction. It was so weird. It kind of came to me where I was like, I was studying and I was taking a break and it just like came into my mind. I'm somebody who creates content on kind of just a whim or inspiration. And it starts out saying like, I don't need therapy. But as a population medicine and health researcher, we know that there are so many other systemic factors that impact our individual level of well-being. And so that's sort of the perspective that I give throughout the video, saying like, you know, we need community, or we need, basically all of the infrastructure in place so that we don't necessarily need to rely on therapy. But then I go at the end to say, actually, it's not that I'm saying I don't need therapy, but in fact, I do need therapy, but I want to be able to actually have those preventative health, I guess, systems or infrastructure in place.
Have a system in place that supports us so that we're not feeling like we're at our wits' end and struggling in such a desperate way in some cases. And I think the thing that drew me to you, and I thought to myself, how does such a young person have such a profound insight on to the system? But then when we got to chatting and I got to know a little bit more about your education and stuff, it's all making sense to me now. So tell us a little bit about, I already know, but she's going to tell you guys about your education and sort of what's led you to where you're at today.
So I started out in psychology in my undergraduate. I started doing it because I've always been very interested in people and why they think the way they do. And truthfully, maybe at the time I didn't really understand fully why I decided to go into what I was doing, but it was something my parents have always said, like, you know, you're going to go into higher education. After you go into higher education, like, you're going to get a stable job. You're going to do this. So truthfully, I think I went in a little bit naively, not fully knowing, but also knowing, you know what, psychology sounds good because I'm interested in people. And then in my second year, that's when I fully realized that I wanted to get curious about research. It was something that you kind of hear about when you're outside of the research world. It feels very kind of foreign, like you don't know what that really means.
Yeah.
And so
what are you researching? Are you in a lab like with petri dishes and whatever?
Yeah. And so like my understanding of research was very much that, like, it was like you go to high school and you're in your chemistry, and I was horrible at that.
Potions and stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And so I started volunteering for an organizational industrial research lab as an assistant, and we were doing a lot of just like the grunt work that a research assistant does, like transcription. But I really loved the research environment. I loved getting to talk to the graduate students, meet peers that were going through in like second year, third year university. And honestly, I haven't left research since. That's been something that I've always really liked.
Cool.
So
qualitative or quantitative?
Both. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do mixed methods, but I will say qualitative is probably the closest to my heart. Like that is something
Same.
that, if I were to gun to my head, have to do a method, it would be
research.
It would be qualitative, because I think, especially learning about research, you really think about quantitative numbers, and that was really drilled into our heads very early on. And it wasn't until later on in my undergraduate program that I even knew that there was such a thing as qualitative research.
Yeah.
And then once I found out and did my honors thesis as a qualitative researcher, I was like, okay, this is what I love.
Yeah. I barely passed quantitative methods.
It's intense.
Like I remember after the midterm, I went home and cried, and I wrote the professor, I don't know what I'm going to do. He passed me with a D, but I passed.
Oh my gosh.
And I kept it because I was like, I don't care if this impacts my GPA. I can't do that again.
I think people don't realize it's a lot of statistics.
Yes.
It's all statistics.
Oh my gosh.
And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quantitative methods. That was otherworldly for me. It bent my mind around things. And then I was so afraid of research and afraid of the concept of research, because I thought that it was all stats and formulas and, all kinds of things. But then actually later on, I ended up working in a research center as well, the Sheridan Elder Research Center.
Okay.
All of the research that I did was qualitative. Yeah. And I think I was, yours is way fancier than mine, but I was doing a study on long distance caregiving.
Oh.
And the impact that the sandwich generation, who are caring for aging loved ones and their growing children, and the generation where they live at a distance and their elderly loved one, much like yourself, you have parents that live at a distance from you. So you maybe feel that sometimes when you're away from your parents.
Yes,
I know I certainly did when my parents were not well and I lived away from home. So that's very, very fascinating. So your, I guess, brand that you are creating on social media. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Wellness Scientist? Because I think that's brilliant. I love that name very much. How did that come to you? Was it like middle of the night, wake from a dream and it was this epiphany, or is it something you've been thinking about for a long time?
Okay, so I'm going to correct you there. And the reason I'm going to correct you, so you said the Wellness Scientist, and it's because I went back and forth between
Wellbeing.
the Wellness Science, and I went back from Wellness and the Wellbeing. And I think that's really important, because at first I was going to switch between the two, but then the reason I explicitly chose Wellbeing is because I think I identify myself in the health and wellness category in terms of content creation, if I had to consider anything. And I feel like the wellness influencer category is very much around the individual. It's around nutrition. It's around fitness. It's around aesthetics. And as much as I love that, I think that's great. My content is a little bit different than that. And so when I think of well-being, I think of it as a more holistic measure of it. So that's why I actually went with
I agree with you.
the Wellbeing Scientist. And I don't know. I have a hard time saying even the word wellness. I don't know why.
It's a little tongue in cheek. I just think because especially post like in the pandemic, everybody leaned into this wellness trend, and everybody was, and the whole conversation around mental health and well-being and wellness and all of that, it's completely been flipped on its head in the last 5 years, I think. So I also, if I can add, I think the idea of being is like a human being, and like the wellness of a human being is different than wellness as like a lifestyle that you live.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
An aesthetically curated lifestyle. And
where you wake up at 5 and you drink your vitamins and you drink your greens and then you go, like, that's wellness, I think. Well-being, I think, has like a soul component to it. And like the things that influenced you in your life and the things that continue to influence you today. Speaking of influence, you said that your parents were aware that they wanted you to go into higher education? Were they trying to influence you in any way?
Yeah. It wasn't an influence. It was a threat. It was, you are going into higher education. You don't have a say about it.
But
it was brainwashing.
Did they have a say in what you were going to study? Like, did they want you to be a doctor or a lawyer? Or no, they didn't. They just said you have to do university.
Yeah. So funny enough, though. Okay, and so I was just talking about this to somebody in my community. So I was a competitive pianist growing up, and so I was either going in two directions. I was gonna either do, I guess, performance, and I wanted to be either a music director and or an adjudicator, or I was gonna go into psychology. But then I remember I finished, what was it, grade 12 piano, and I could have went and got my teaching. There's like a teaching level after that. And I decided to quit. I remember my piano teacher went, she was pissed. She's like, what the? I
bet.
Yeah,
oh my
she
gosh.
like looked at my mom. She's like, because my mom's a piano teacher.
Oh,
she looked at my mom.
goodness.
She did not teach me though. She looked at my mom and kind of was like, are you sure like you want her to quit piano? Because
she just spent how many years dedicated to this?
And,
wow.
And like, I will say, I don't like saying this out loud, but like I am talented. It is something I could have gone into if I wanted to.
I have a very hard time too when people are like, I'm like, what? No, I'm not. Yeah. But you're probably out here playing Mozart and Chopin, and I'm, I've got a little keyboard over there in the corner that I'm like, ding, 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 ding. So to be able to play an instrument, you are talented, especially that level of being able to play. Do you still play ever?
I don't have a piano where I live, but my mom has a grand piano, and when I go home, I do sometimes do that.
Goodness. Piano is one of my favorite instruments. I like piano and violin very much.
Oh, yeah. You know how to play the violin?
No, God, no. I wish. Yeah. My parents, unfortunately, didn't put me into instruments. My parents put me into sports.
Oh, okay. I love that.
So I was always very musically inclined. I can... what do you call it? Like
play by ear?
Play by ear. Yeah. If I hear something, I can sit in front of it, not quickly, but like I can plunk away and figure it out. Yeah.
No, I'm not play by ear.
With, what is it called? Tabs, like music tab. Is that what it's called? Music tabs, where it just shows you where to put your fingers. I can teach myself that way too.
Okay.
Yeah. There's YouTube videos.
But you can't identify the keys looking at them. Like you couldn't know
I have them labeled.
Oh, with the tape? Oh my gosh. You'd be a music teacher's worst nightmare. I was a music teacher for a little bit.
Any teacher's worst nightmare because I teach myself things in weird ways. Like everything that we do here was like self-taught.
I love that.
Everything that we do here was self-taught.
Yeah.
I've said this a bajillion times, but I've learned more in the last year than I think I've learned in 10 years. Just like trying to teach myself understanding podcasts and content creation and brand development. And I think I kind of cut off your story about the well-being scientists. So when you were thinking about this brand that you were going to develop for yourself and you landed on well-being, what did you want in your mind? What were you envisioning it was going to become? Like, or is that even totally figured out yet? Like, do you know the direction that this is going to go? Or hope that
I would say I'm in the very early stages, but I do have an idea that it really is. So to like a lay public idea, it's like a science communication platform where I really want to bring science about well-being, like all different facets, even things that you wouldn't consider well-being. So like public health literature and things like that, but in a very accessible way. So that's like the first pillar that I see it. The second is just, I guess this sounds a little bit selfish too, but sharing my journey as somebody that's a woman of color, unpacking what it was like growing up in a very white town. And how not until I'm 27 years old, just unpacking that now and realizing, moving to Toronto, I've always wanted to live there. I never really understood why until now. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's all hitting me now. Now I can unpack that and doing it. So like, I think, like boldly, I guess.
Did you feel like an outsider when you were in school? Like as a young girl, did you feel different? Because for those of you who don't know, from a very small, well, I don't want to call it very small. It feels very small when you live in Toronto, but you're from a very small town, white collar. So were you one of the only racialized people in your classes? Did people point that out to you? Like
it's very interesting because like my parents are white. I was adopted. So
we could talk about that too. I was adopted too.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So growing up, it was always, Karli's just one of us. We don't see her for her being different. It's just Karli. So people that grew up close to me, I'm just Karli. Like,
were you adopted from baby?
China. Yeah.
From China as an infant?
As a baby. Yeah. So I turned one when I came here. So to me, growing up, I always felt white, honestly, until it would be the comments I would see or like going into high school. Honestly, that's really when I think I noticed, because other people noticed, because they would assume I wasn't from here. They wouldn't assume that I grew up with white parents. They wouldn't assume that like, you know,
and you don't have an accent, like, so you know, so
it would be like, oh, that Asian girl, oh, he's dating that Asian girl, or like, oh, like the Asian, right? Because I was Asian one girl out of 5 people in my entire high school that was different at the time.
Wow.
But now I go back and I look in Woodstock, and it is a lot more
that's
ethnically
the same with
diverse.
Me. I'm all from a small town too, not as small as your small town, but when I left, it still felt very whitewashed to me. And now I haven't been back in a while, but whenever I do go back, it's a lot more diverse. And I don't know if that's because of the international students that have come in, like, and if there's satellite campuses and stuff in those smaller areas. I'm not 100% sure, but I do definitely feel like if you grew up in a small town in the 90s, early 2000s, only in the last 10, 15 years have we seen more diversity flock to those areas, I find.
And it is disgusting, the type of discourse around all the white people that used to live or that live there, and that it's like, oh, like they've taken over.
They're taking our jobs. And it is very, very unfortunate. Yes. Yeah. And it's funny. Before we started recording, I was showing Karli some of the stuff that I'm working on in my chaotic little DIY dopamine corner. And she pulled out one of the crew necks that has the camouflage, but like the sticks and the wood camouflage. She's like, this looks like my hometown. I'm like, girl, me too. Yeah. No, I totally get the feeling of growing up in a small town. And I was always drawn towards Toronto too. I had applied to do my undergrad in Toronto and Windsor, Ontario, because that's where my stepmom went.
Okay.
And I didn't want to go to Windsor. I had applied to all of the universities in Toronto and Windsor. And guess where gave me the most scholarship money?
Oh no.
Windsor. So my parents were like, you're going where the money is. You don't have a choice. So I don't regret that now, because Windsor is a very diverse, very multicultural.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I remember walking into the student center at one point and looking around and being like, I think I'm the only white girl here. Like that's how it felt in the cafeteria area. It was very, and I've traveled all over the world and been all over to all kinds of places. I love diversity. I feel like the more diverse a team is, the more I just think it makes everything better when there's diversity.
You know what? Let's talk
involved.
about this. So we're talking about diversity. And one thing that I found, especially in the research that I'm doing, is what I love is that, yes, we are having more conversations about diversity. And I saw a quote on social media, and I'm not going to say it exactly because I can't even remember, but it was like, there's one thing to promote diversity, but it's actually unsafe when you are promoting diversity and you're getting these diverse people in higher positions, but yet we don't provide an infrastructure or policies or programs that actually allow them to thrive, that allow them to move up in the ranks. And so it's like, oh, we're all talking about diversity, but are we at the points when our institutions or structures are actually ready?
Are we practicing what we preach? Are we
practicing it? And oftentimes the answer is no, or like it's in progress. And it's so hard because like these are entrenched things that have been here for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And we have finally, I think, some representation in, I guess it depends what industry.
It's not enough. There's only some representation. And I think we were talking about this in the car too, like diversity in women representation, like in leadership positions. It's so uncommon. It's so uncommon. And then you can also characterize some of the stereotypes that are placed upon women in leadership positions that are of a diverse background. It's almost like there's this expectation that they are, just what I've observed anyway, that they're not as empathetic, or that they have to be stronger personalities in order to get that position of authority. Have you ever, do you have any perspectives on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of, I think, archetypes and a lot of kind of making caricatures out of people. And honestly, to see a woman that is diverse and who is in a position of leadership, I can understand why they would be a certain way.
They're probably trying to they've had to overcome so much. They've had to overcome so much.
And I think it's so hard now. It's because it's like, do you lean into being feminine, or do you lean into away from being feminine? Right.
Yeah. I know you haven't been doing as much work as I have in your career as of yet, because you've been studying for a bajillion years, but you do work as a graduate student and that kind of thing, right? So I work part-time as a community engaged research scholar. Yeah. Oh, Brilliant. Beautiful. Love that. Have you ever experienced dynamics with a boss, whether it be a female boss or a male boss, where you can feel that difference in the way that they lead or the way that they're, influencing?
Yep.
I'd love to talk to you about that because I've also experienced that, but I've had experiences with female bosses that have been more negative than my experience with male bosses for some reason.
I would agree with that, honestly, from my experience. There's one mentor in specific in my research career that I looked up to and I still really look up to. And I remember her reputation was the Ice Queen. And she was a woman of color. And when you get to know her, you understand why she is the way she is. And it's not her fault, but it's just the way that she had to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have had many bosses in my career, and it felt to me like they would scoop me under their wing for a period of time, but then it almost felt like if they felt like I was going to surpass them or that there was a threat to me, like moving on, or me even trying to express an interest in doing more and learning more, I often felt like there was a bit of a glass ceiling that was created for me by my female bosses versus my male bosses. I felt like they were a little bit more hands off and more like encouraging. And it wasn't for lack of trying. Like I've certainly tried to develop good relationships with my female bosses, and it's not every single one of them, but more of them than not, where that, I don't know, just a butting of heads unnecessarily and like a breakdown in communication. And I don't know, I think that women in general, to get to that position of leadership, it's hard enough. And I feel like we should be focusing more on building each other up and building each other up together instead of it being a competition against each other.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I feel like that also speaks to just the culture that is masculine, that is masculinity.
Yes.
And so you're a man and you don't identify that, right? It's invisible to you because that has been the normal.
Yeah.
And I think as women, we're constantly up against that. And what that looks like and what that can come out with is women against women, right?
Yeah. I also heard this thing recently that there are women who are planning their months based around their cycles. Have you heard of this?
I've started to have to do that.
Really?
Because
my gosh, I feel like I need to start to do that, because I swear there's one week of the month where I am a psychopath. Like I am not a normal human being. I should not be making decisions. I should not be, conversating with people. And I've seen a lot more executive leaders who are actually planning their months based around their menstrual cycles.
Okay, I just want to specify. So, because I know there's some people that will take that and they will make the leap of, okay, so women are even admitting that they can't make decisions around their month. That's because they're weak. But I want to specify that here what we're talking about is that because our body is not it's hardly known to ourselves even. We don't have education about that.
Yeah, yes. There's hardly any research on it.
Because our structures have been created in a way that is assuming that the workforce is male, does not have like the hormonal complexities that we deal with, are not childbearing, are not being the default parent. We have to fight against like all these inflexibilities in our workday of all these assumptions. And so, we feel like we're being like we are weak because we can't make the decisions or we can't do this during the week that is like literally shedding our bulb.
Where your whole equilibrium of hormones and just everything that's going on in your brain and your physiology, like it's all out of whack.
Yeah.
Completely out of our control too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then enter in, birth control and menopause and all of those things.
Yeah.
Like, I when I heard that women are actually scheduling their executive leadership lives and like the weeks that they, put very important meetings and that kind of things, like they're tailoring it to that. I think it's amazing.
It's amazing. And also frustrating that it has to get to the point that like we have to be such a hard advocate for ourselves to do that because the structures won't do that for us, right? Like,
and isn't it I mean, I feel like I was living under a rock or something, I guess, or maybe I just didn't have the right insight to it. But I didn't realize that so much of our health and decisions that were made about our health were actually based off of research that was done on men.
Yeah.
And there actually is only within the last like 5-10 years is the dialogue or the narrative around this coming to the forefront where we need to be testing this experience for women.
Yeah.
Speaking of being a woman, you're also a mom.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. Like, let's talk about what it was like for you to make the decision to be a mom and a scholar and balancing work and life and the complexities of raising a child during the pandemic too. Like your child is 4 years old.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I'd really like to know your insight on this.
I'm smiling because I know that Richard's over here smiling. Like, we have very different perspectives about this. And it's interesting because the phrasing around having children is always around the choice too, and how it really felt in the time. So my pregnancy was unplanned. I got pregnant on the IUD.
Oh,
so I felt that it wasn't a choice. I truly felt that when you find out that you are pregnant, I found out I was 8 weeks pregnant. At that point, it didn't feel like you can do this or you can do this. It felt like
you put every effort in place to prevent this from happening, and it still happened. It's like a divine miracle.
Yes. Yeah, no. And it was actually retained throughout the entire pregnancy. They couldn't take it out. And so when he was born, that it came out. Like, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it didn't affect the
I was a high risk pregnancy.
I was going to say, yeah. Like, your cervix would have been all kinds of risky business.
They were thinking it could puncture the amniotic sac, right?
Yeah. I've also heard of babies being born with the IUD like embedded in them and stuff.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yes. I've heard of this. But this is a miracle that you became a mother. And so I love that you leaned into it being a miracle and that, that this isn't a choice. So were you in school when you got pregnant?
So I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I finished my undergraduate.
Whoa.
Yeah. But before I found out I was pregnant, I had already accepted grad school. And then after I found out I was pregnant, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to tell my advisor. And I knew just meeting my advisor that she would be supportive because she's also a mother. And so I just remember the phone call being like, telling her, and she's going, oh, okay. Like, very supportive, obviously.
Yeah.
But just, I couldn't imagine what was going on in her mind, right?
Yeah.
And some advisors, like, honestly, I was thinking she could decide, I can't do this because with a mother, right? You take more time.
Against your human rights?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, for her to say, oh, you know what? I accepted you, but now that I know this about you, I don't accept you anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what professors would have the authority to do, but I do think that supervisors would have the ability just from saying, like, knowing how long your program's going to take now, right?
Yeah.
And knowing,
and maybe too, it's on a case by case basis. Like, if you were somebody that struggled through something or, they didn't see something special in you, then maybe they would have been a little less supportive. Okay. So you were pregnant into your graduate program.
And the timeline freakishly worked out because the way it worked with my funding is that I couldn't do grad school unless I was funded. And so you can't take a leave of absence until you complete a full-time 1 semester. And I literally finished 1 semester and gave birth 2 weeks later.
Oh my goodness.
It worked out in terms of timeline. So then I could take a mat leave, even though it was unpaid. So that's another thing is being a grad student and being a mom, like, it is very hard financially because there's no support, right?
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
So did you qualify for any type of government assistance?
EI at that point, because
okay, good.
Actually this was during COVID lockdowns too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So did you get CERB or whatever as well?
I didn't get CERB. So you know what I realized? Maybe it wasn't EI. Maybe it was actually just maternity leave. Maybe it was just maternity leave. Yeah.
I have no idea, but I do know that having a baby is very expensive. Yeah. And I know that just being a student is expensive to afford your life. So you have a partner. Was your partner very supportive in all of this?
Yeah. Absolutely. Good.
Yeah. Saying, like, continue your education and I support you 100%. Yeah. That's good. That's very good. I think that because you're the woman and because you're the one that's carrying the baby and you already alluded to being the primary parent at some times, I think it's very admirable that you made the decision that you were still going to do what you were going to do and you made it work. So how soon after, or did you take a full mat leave?
Yeah, I took a full year. And my advisor told me that. She's like, you deserve to take a full, and I'm so glad I did. Like if I had any advice, if people financially could, to take the year, because you are never going to get that time back.
Yeah. I'll speak on behalf of one of my very best friends, my friend who has 2 under 2. Her second was not planned, and she was supposed to go back to work, but she went back to work pregnant and didn't even accumulate enough hours for her maternity leave to kick in. So she literally gave birth and had to go right back to teach to accumulate more hours while she had a newborn and a 1-year-old at home, just to accumulate enough hours so that she could take off her proper mat leave.
Okay, so now this reminds me, because I forgot. It happened so long ago. And this is why it's so freakish to me, because like even though it was unplanned, I had worked full time at the Office of Research before I started grad school. So because of the hours and because this was COVID lockdowns, they reduced the threshold of the amount of hours to qualify for paid mat leave. So I worked the amount of I needed, and so that I was able to get paid mat leave.
Wow.
From that job.
I don't care. Your son was meant to be. There's nothing in the universe that tells me that he was not, because all of these things lining up, right? Yeah. I think it's funny how the things, and this has happened to me a lot in my life recently, the things I think that we stress out about the most end up working out just fine. It's like these stories or fears that we create in our mind that can sometimes be debilitating and crippling. And then when it ends up working out, as we were saying before, you look back and you're like, oh, that's why that happened the way that it did. And this was supposed to happen because the stars aligned and the planets aligned. And
and it is actually very freaky, because at the time, like the first hour I found out on the phone from my OB saying, like, she didn't even say you're pregnant. She's like, so you're very pregnant. And I was sitting on my kitchen table and Richard was like across from me, and he knew before I even told him what happened.
No.
And I remember though, as much as like that would definitely panic somebody, I already had the intuitive feeling that like it was going to be fine. Like I actually wasn't scared.
Good.
Which was great. I wasn't scared about it. I wasn't stressed about it, even though I had nothing figured out. I don't know why, but it was an intuitive feeling.
So let's go back to your parents when you had to tell them and they were like, you're going to be in higher education and you're going to do all these things.
The first thing my mom said was, you're not quitting your master's.
Of course
and
not.
I said, thanks, Mom. You know, just because you said that, I'm not going to quit my master's.
That's funny. And do they like being grandparents?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so after they found, my dad wasn't even shocked. He was like super supportive. But my mom, for the first like 5 minutes, she was like, okay, when I said, you guys need to, can you sit down at the kitchen table? My mom's like, you're pregnant, aren't you? And she like freaked out for a little bit. But then like 5 minutes later, she was like, so when are we going to go get like newborn clothes?
Oh my goodness.
So yeah.
Well, I think it's really special because you're adopted. So they chose you. And so the fact that they are now getting to be grandparents, I think is so awesome. So do you talk about your adoption story? I would love to know your adoption story.
Yeah. So I was born in China and then I was an orphan. So the story that they know so far, there's not a lot. I don't know any like biological, I guess like history or anything, but they put me actually in a box outside of, what was it? The gate. There was like orphanage gates.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so some of the people that were also adopted at the same time as me, they didn't have that same experience, right? Some of them might've been found in ditches or like on the side of the road or like,
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. So it's like to think that from day one, right?
Do you think it's because you're a girl?
Yeah. Oh, because I was born in 1997. So that was when I think it's the one child policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One child and everybody wanted a boy.
Everyone wanted a boy, right? Yeah.
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 Wow. So you mentioned before that you were adopted and you turned 1 when you came here. So did your parents go, what is the process? I don't even know what the process is to adopt a baby from China.
Yeah, they went as a group. So there was
It was just like a field trip to adopt a baby?
A group of like all these white people, really. And like I actually keep in touch with two of them I'm quite close with, all around the same age. And so
they were in the same orphanage together.
So one of them was from a different orphanage, but the other ones were all from the same.
Wow.
Yeah. So they don't know any of our birthdays. Like our birthdays were picked for us. Yeah. So whenever they're like, oh, are you a Libra? I'm like, I am, but like, am I really? I don't know.
Maybe not. I don't know. So
they
astrology doesn't apply to you.
Yeah. They had to guess at our ages. But what was I saying?
Oh, your parents and they came on a field trip.
Yeah.
And
they
so
had to stay. It was a rule you had to stay 2 weeks like before you got or I don't know if it was before you got the children or like in total you had to stay for 2 weeks. And then like when you got to China, they had like an agency basically that helped them through the whole process. It was, I think, a year process just going through.
I would think that you would have to take classes and stuff.
Yeah, I imagine they did. But it's so cool because my dad recently got everything digitized. So a couple months ago, I like looked back at this just bawling. I don't know why.
I would bawl too. Are you kidding?
And seeing it was like surreal. Like the moment they handed us to them, they got it on tape.
Oh,
and they gave me away to the wrong. They gave me away to the wrong parents, and my dad knew immediately because they sent our photos. But they always say sending the photos.
Mine.
Yeah, but what they say is they'll give them the photos, but say just to let you know, like that child might actually be dead when you get there, so you may get a different child. Yeah. So
everything you're saying is giving me goosebumps all over my body. That's wild. Wild. And so he saw you and he's like, that's mine.
That's Karli. Like,
they had named you already.
I don't know actually if they named me already. That's a good question. I need to ask them that.
Oh my gosh. That's so awesome. So are you an only child?
So my dad has two kids. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we never grew up. So technically I grew up alone and
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's very special. That's not the same adoption story that I had.
Yeah.
I was adopted. So I was the product of a teenage pregnancy. So my mom was 12 when she had her first child. And then I was born 16 months later.
Wow.
Her first child was put up for adoption. And then she was like, screw all of you. I'm going to have a baby and I'm going to make that baby happen. However, I'm going to make it happen. I did at one time have access to her diary. So I do know that I was conceived in a shed.
Okay.
So that's fun. You were left in a box.
Yeah,
I was conceived in a shed.
Oh my gosh.
And so she did have custody of me for the first 4-ish years of my life. And I often say that I think the reason I am the way that I am is because those formative years when your brain is developing and when you're forming bonds and that kind of thing, they say that a child's brain is almost fully developed by about 5 years old. And those first years with my mom, I was her everything. She was with me all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we were hardly ever separated.
Aww.
I was speaking the alphabet in English and French at 2 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
I was always advanced, but it's because she talked to me, I think anyway.
Yeah.
It's because she talked to me like I was her friend.
Right.
And you know, when I was in senior kindergarten, they wanted to bump me up to grade 2 and she was just a teenager making decisions. And she was like, no, I don't want her to be younger than the other kids because I don't want her to get made fun of. You know, I was made fun of. And so she made decisions for me as a child herself.
Yeah. Wow.
But unfortunately, when I was around 4 years old or so, she fell into addiction and mental health issues. And she had another child, so my younger brother.
Right.
She had him when she got pregnant when she was 17. So I think, and who could say now, because she's been an addict for decades and, you know, been medicated and all kinds of things for years and years.
But you have contact with her to know this?
No.
Oh,
I don't know where she is now. I did have contact with her up until I had visits with her. We were finally, we were apprehended from her many times between the ages of 4 and 10. We were apprehended, I think 5 or 6 times and put into foster care and stuff throughout. But then the last apprehension was one of the worst apprehensions. And it ended up being that I was in foster care for a couple of weeks while court proceedings were going on. And then my younger brother's father had the choice to adopt me or not. If he didn't adopt me, I would have ended up in the system. But they didn't want my brother and I to be separated. So
is he your dad then?
No, not biological father.
No, but you call him.
I call him.
Okay.
I called him dad until he passed away. Yeah, he passed away in 2017 from Lou Gehrig's disease, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they got full custody of my brother and then they adopted me. I was 10 turning 11.
Wow.
Yeah. I had a very, very tumultuous childhood.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people that go through adoption, there's a story, right? Like there's some kind of a story. And funny enough, more talk on adoption. The baby that my mom had when she was 12, I forget I was saying something about adoption. Oh, the baby that my mom had when she was 12. So she was 12 all the way up till April 17th was her birthday, and she gave birth on April 19th. So she was 2 days 13 when she gave birth to her first baby. Yeah.
Wow.
And that baby was put up for adoption. She didn't have a choice. They basically had the adoption. She got to choose the parents. So they did work with an agency, and she was presented with profiles and whatever, and she got to choose the parents, but it was a closed adoption. So all she was allowed to do, I think, was like write a letter or something that he would be given later on in life. So funny story. Not funny story, I guess long story. When I was 18, like 2 weeks after I turned 18, I got a phone call from his adoptive parents. And they said, we had to wait until you turned 18. We've known that you existed. And if we had known sooner, we would have fought to adopt you as well. Because we're the adoptive parents of your brother. And your brother is very interested in meeting his mother. And I said, you don't want that. 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 And I explained all the reasons why he wouldn't want that. But unfortunately, he was also struggling with mental health and addiction issues. And he had always felt very alien in his adoption situation. And he just felt this really intense desire to be connected with his biological mother. Did you ever feel that? Do you ever feel that at all?
No, I never did. I remember, honestly, as a child, I never really, I would always say that my parents were dead.
Really?
Up until like I had a child, that's when I started getting more reflective about it and emotional about it, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I did 23andMe just to see.
I've actually been wanting to do that.
I recommend that you do, because even though it's, not people that I'll ever meet or anything like that, but it was very, very interesting to kind of see family tree stuff. And every once in a while I'll get a notification being like, you have another distant relative. And I know there's probably conspiracies about like putting your DNA into some database or whatever, but it's like they've got everything else. I feel like they have every other piece of it. Have my spit in a tube, whatever. But yeah, so he had every wish to be reconnected with his biological mom. So I was able to make that happen, and unfortunately, it didn't go well. I knew it wasn't going to go well, but they kind of fed into each other, and they started doing drugs and stuff together. And then they had created this whole story in their mind that I was supposed to be the one that was put up for adoption, and he was supposed to be the one that stayed to take care of her.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez. Yeah. So he came along when I was 18. I don't have a relationship with them anymore because of how I knew the direction that it was going to go. And the sad thing is, like, his adoptive parents are lovely, 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 lovely humans, but he's just such a troubled human that I think, it really weighed on them. And then when they met me, they were like, we wish that we had adopted you. Like, we wish that you had been, that we could have adopted you too. So yeah, anyways, adoption, it's quite the thing to go through.
Yeah.
And because I was adopted later in life, I always felt different. Like, I always felt different in my family dynamic. So I think the wonderful thing about you being adopted so early is you didn't ever know that you were different until it was pointed out to you.
Yeah. Until I think though, internally I did know, but it was never something that, like, I never had a bad childhood. Looking back, it's like now I'm starting to process my feelings that I couldn't really understand, I think.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, more difference rather than like my parents are my parents, right?
Of course.
But it's more like me feeling different in terms of growing up around whiteness and the culture. That's where I think I felt the difference. Not necessarily them not being my parents, but yeah.
So when my mom was pregnant with me, she ran away from home because she got pregnant the second time, right?
Right.
And heaven forbid. And so my mom's cultural heritage is Mennonite, like Mexican Mennonite.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. So there was, sadly, and her story is not my story to tell, and I'll never tell her story for her, but there was abuse for sure in her formative years. At the time in the 80s, when you were born, we're 10 years apart, my goodness. So when I was born, there was a not-for-profit that had just been founded. It was called the Rehoboth Home. the House for Unwed Mothers, an alternative to abortion. And so my mom was the first mom to go and move into this like house for unwed mothers as basically, you know, being banished from her family and whatever. So I was born into a not-for-profit. Like I was, So when I went on this journey to start a not-for-profit last year, I actually reached out to the not-for-profit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was very cool. So I was able, Shannon and I actually, we went to St. Thomas of all places. Okay. And it's no longer called the Rehoboth Home, like alternative to a Schmishmorshman. Like it's not called that anymore, but it's called Fresh Start Support Services.
Okay, that sounds good. A lot more.
And so I asked, I said, like, do you have any records of like the first babies or anything? Like, I was just curious. And they didn't, unfortunately, you know, however many decades ago, but she was able to share with me a speech that the founder of the not-for-profit spoke at their 25th anniversary. And he spoke about my mom and I.
Wow.
Yeah. And the copy of the speech. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Not as crazy as getting adopted from China and like coming here from a box on a, I think that people's journeys and like what brings them to where they end up. I'm very fascinated by people too, and like why they think the way they think and why they do the things they do. And it's so funny that some of the ways that we are nature, and some of the things that we are nurture. Are there any things about you that you think are more nature over nurture? Like anything that you think may be more like your biological parents from your adoptive parents?
That's hard to say.
Can I say the reason why I say this?
Yeah.
Because for my entire life, I said I didn't want to be like my mother. But there are so many times when I find myself acting like my biological mother. And maybe that was from experiences that I had with her because I had experiences with her. Yeah. But do you ever feel that? Like you...
Ask Richard. He'll answer that. There are definitely attributes that I have of my mother. But I guess, I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, the nature versus nurture, versus nurture influence.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for the nurture influence that I've had in my life.
Yeah.
Even though it was very discombobulated and segmented. And but I often say that the people that I was influenced by the most in my life were my teachers and CAS workers and police officers and guidance counselors.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome that you had... That was your community, right?
Yeah,
right?
I was and because I was a very bright student, I was selected for a lot of opportunities and stuff.
Right.
Were you a bright student all throughout school? Like, did you do very well in public school and grade school?
So I've always considered myself to be somebody that I never felt came naturally to me. Even to this day, I don't feel like they come naturally to me. But that being said, like I did well. Yeah. Like I've always been in the 90s.
Yeah, I never studied a day in my life in high school.
See, I had to.
You did?
I've always had to work very hard for everything that I've done.
Good for you. Because when I got to university, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
You never knew what to do.
I didn't know. I think I studied for like maybe one biology test in high school. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not like
no,
we envy you.
But then I got to university and I struggled and I did not do very well. Obviously, I got a D in stats. Yeah. Like I did not do very well. But it's not that I don't love to learn. I love to learn. Like I love learning. But in a controlled environment, I find like regurgitating information, that's not the way of learning that I like to learn. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Even reading sometimes I struggle. But you probably spend so much time doing that. It's just like second, third, fourth nature to you now at this point.
Yeah. No, I love reading for sure.
Do you have any hopes and wishes for your own son at this stage?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's funny because when you talked about are you nature and nurture, I think about it actually, I can think of more answers about my son than I can about me. He's a lot.
Because you're an onlooker looking in on him. Yeah.
He's a lot like me, to be honest. I think he's a jokester like his dad, but he's a lot like me. I think he would be a lot like me in terms of temperament, in terms of maybe perhaps career analytical. He's very persistent and stubborn. I'm very persistent and stubborn.
That should be. Gotta be in this world.
Sorry, what was your question before that?
I don't even remember what the question was, if I'm being honest with you. I think it was, do you have wishes for your son? Because I often think about, like, I don't have my own children, but if I had children today, I would ask them not necessarily, what do you want to be when you grow up, but like, what kind of problems do you want? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of problems do you want to solve? So with you having such an incredible scope on humanity and the experience of the well-being of being a person, and with how quickly our world is changing, what do you think that's going to look like for him in the future? And do you have any wishes for him in the future?
I would say I definitely do want him to have like a financial stability element there. Like, I do believe that getting out and having as much exposure to anything, I want him to be able to do what he finds passionate about, but also in something that is reasonable that he can financially provide for himself. I think that's important, especially growing up in the city, right? Yeah. I'm not somebody who's just going to hand my son things. Like, he needs to work for it. I think that's important to have a work ethic, but also, honestly, I think at this point, it's like just trying to see what his interest is and really just support him in whatever that interest is.
It's so beautiful that you said something specific. The words that you said specifically is to have a work ethic. And I think that's another reason why it's so amazing that you're on this podcast, is because so much of the media paints your generation as the most unemployable, and they don't want to work, and they don't have goals. And I'm sitting here with somebody who has committed yourself to growth and development, and now you're building a whole community. So I think the media has it twisted. Like, I really do. I think that the media is maybe highlighting a very small pocket of your generation. And I don't think we're celebrating enough of the people like yourself who are doing such incredible things and wanting to build incredible things to make the world a better place for the future. I think that's very important.
I think part of it is because our definition of what is success is different. And our definition of what professionalism is also different. And I think our generation, perhaps, rather than having these inherent things of like, you must do this, you must follow this rule, you must be, play nice, be a people pleaser. It's very much like living in your authentic self. And I think that also kind of ties back into some people when they're like, oh, there's only two genders and there's only this and this, because they want to put labels on people, or they want to understand them in the way they understand the world. And I think that this generation is very much like trying to push back on that in being able to have freedom in embodying who their authentic self is. And I think that doing that in our traditional workforce is very hard.
Very hard. I feel so much like the language that young people are speaking and the language that the workforce speaks is not the same language. And we're expecting a younger generation who's been brought up in a system where you have technology and information and you're inundated with facts, and you can basically figure out anything you want in 3 seconds flat by typing in a prompt to ChatGPT nowadays. Whereas when the way that our system was created 50, 60 years ago by a group of white men at a boardroom table deciding HR textbooks, who developed HR textbooks at that time? Well, we didn't have the internet and technology and ways of thinking about humanity and life and survival. And I believe that your generation is going to change everything. I think that your generation will flip it on its head.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I feel like something is coming, and I'm not sure what that is.
Me too. I don't know what it is either. I can't feel it, but there's got to be a change. The revolution. Yes. You'll lead it. The well-being scientist with the well-being community. Yeah. I'll be right behind you with a flag. Yeah, that's good. So when
lady,
with the purple hair. Yeah. Oh my God. So you say that the definition of success is different. So what is the definition of success for you?
It's definitely not a 9 to 5.
It's definitely not. That 9 to 5 life is. I actually heard that by the year 2035, the 9 to 5 will be gone. The 9 to 5 is not going to last.
By when you said?
2035.
2035. Yeah. Okay, got to hang in
10
there.
10 more years. Yeah. I imagine it'll start to fizzle out in the next 5 years or so. But yeah, I don't remember. Some economist said that. Yeah.
What is success? I think, and this comes back to like, what is the definition that, I mean, not speaking to my whole generation as a monolith, but it's like, rather than seeing success in your profession, it's building your profession around who you want to be and seeing success as you. And I think like, at least I grew up thinking you go into one profession. It's like you're pushed into one thing. And I think we are people of multitudes, and people are realizing you don't have to find success in your job. You can do something for the money, and you can go and do podcasts on the side.
To fund your, to fund your passion.
Yeah, people are realizing like they're fed up with having to like work their asses off, and at the end of the day, not be able to afford to retire, not be able to afford a house, not be able to like all these things.
Yeah. Gen Z, the generation that owns nothing.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't own anything either. I don't own anything either. And it's an impossible uphill climb with the economy and we were having this conversation about the job search, experience in this day and age. It's so competitive.
Yeah.
So competitive, but also like you just have to jump through flaming hoops of fire to even get an interview. And then you might not even hear back if you were or were not the successful candidate.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I believe you, and I believe the same as you, that I think that something has got to change.
It's interesting because I remember when it used to be like you would go in person to like apply for a job, and then it all went online. Now I'm like, it's in person and like coming back where it's like you're making these informal
networking. It's all networking events. Have you seen that in Toronto anyway? It's like people are not going to bars. They're buying tickets to go to networking events.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On Eventbrite, it's all of these like business networking, podcast networking, IT networking. Like I've been to more networking events in 2024 than I did anything else socially. It was all networking events. And like the tickets, I can't remember how much the tickets were to that networking event that we went to in Toronto a couple weeks ago on King West, but it was at a bar on King West and like pitched the podcast, but the entire rest of the event was just circulating and handing out business cards and chatting and talking about your brand.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. One thing though I will say about networking, and maybe it's because I'm just discovering this part of like, building your brand, you do have to network people, but I just don't like the transactional way that it can be approached. Like I think networking does feel in some ways very like
if you're what can you do for me?
And I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. And that's why I don't like social media for that reason. Like I don't even like the term followers because I don't view people like that. It's like
sheep. Yeah. That's not it. No. Exactly. They're your people. They're your community.
Yeah. And so networking, it's like, I know I need to do this, but like, I don't want to do the transactional part of it. How do you make it more relational and less about like, how can I build myself up in my social status, and how can I get this opportunity if I talk to you? And I'm not about that really.
Part of the reason why I created a podcast is because I have major social anxiety. And so while I can go to these networking events and I can do it for a short period of time, if Shannon's with me, she can sense like when I'm done. Like she spent enough time with me where she's like, how are you doing? You good?
Yeah.
Time to go? Like, I can be on, like I can do it, no problem. But I'm so much better in like a one-on-one, sit down, have a meaningful conversation. Small talk is like,
I'm the same way.
Painful for me. Painful for me. Like, let's talk about the oppression of women and childbirth. Like, let's talk about that. I don't want to talk about the weather today. You know what I mean?
That's why I could never work in customer service. I worked in customer service, but I could never.
Okay, so what other jobs have you had? If you've done customer service, what kind of customer service?
My first ever job, I worked on a farm. I had a family friend, just weed whacking.
Oh my goodness,
it was
that's a good first job.
It was brunt labor. Everyone used to do that kind of job.
Yes.
I worked at Wendy's.
Junior bacon cheeseburgers. It's like a food group for me.
I worked at Wendy's. I worked at Eastside Mario's as a hostess. I worked as a server. I worked as an athletic.
Hey, bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah.
Wow. And where else? Sorry, Eastside Mario's.
Eastside Mario's, Wendy's, and then when I went to university, I worked at the athletic center there.
Nice.
I worked as a server. I've always had to work.
Server is always something that I wish that I had gotten into because I think I probably would have been good at it. And you can make a buttload of money. You can make
a lot of money.
Like truckloads of money. I had a friend of mine in Toronto who worked at a breakfast place, Sunnyside Grill or something like that. And it was right kind of on the King West, Queen West, somewhere down there. So they would get the finance people in for breakfast meetings and stuff. He would walk out of there just doing a breakfast shift, like 5 a.m. to 11 or whatever, and walk out with like $300 cash for tips, because people were just going in and buying their like breakfast sandwich and their coffee, but then like tipping $5 or whatever. And he'd have so much turnover for how quickly his tables would flip. He was making so much money. I'm thinking, man, I'm freaking killing myself in a hospital, and you're
Maybe
like
that's
making
what you need to do on your little dream.
I'm gonna go to be a server, I think, or like a golf cart
bartender,
beer girl or
beer
something
girl,
like that. Like I'm not that old. Maybe there'll be something endearing about it. They'll feel sorry for me and tip me more or something. I don't know. But that could very well be. That could very well be in my cards. But I'm not afraid. I'm not above anything.
Barista, I've heard is supposed to be a good.
Is barista supposed to be a good gig?
It's supposed to be a good gig, I guess, if you're needing to not be in healthcare.
I mean, sure. I'm not above anything, but I've said that I will drive Uber. I've said that I will do DoorDash. Like I've said this a million times too, like if I have to start an OnlyFans and start sitting on birthday cakes and like popping balloons with my butt, like that's what I'll do to pay my bills.
Do what you
like,
gotta do.
You have to do what you gotta do in today's world. And I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. I have no idea what I'm going to be when I grow up. What is your end all? Is there a be all and end all for the well-being scientist, Karli? Like for your job, like what you want your business card to say?
I think like rather than that, I kind of view it as like, what kind of community do I want to build and like, how do I want to get there? So like one thing that I'm building is the Wellbeing Mentorship Network, as you know.
Yes, I do.
There's so many logistical things. I'm like, what have I got myself into?
So much, but we can talk about this all day. So what's that going to look like, or what do you envision that to look like?
So right now we have a little pilot happening. Okay, they can't take the research out of me. So there's 31 people that responded for the initial pilot, and we're going to basically, how I envision it is people are having purposeful conversations around a specific area. So it's not about giving a service. It's not a service directory. It's supposed to be like, if your area is, I want to create more third places or third spaces, let's have somebody who has experience in doing this and somebody who wants to learn and
who has access
to it. And it's just having that conversation and connection.
Nice.
And so that's how I view it. So far, we'll see how it goes. And then I have a wait list where I've had a couple people that couldn't get into the pilot, and then I'm going to open it up wider. I'm going to be launching my website soon.
Nice. Are you doing all of that on your own, or do you have support? Oh my gosh, good for you.
I do have actually 4 core volunteers that have been so great. Like I have a brand strategist and graphic designer who I'm working with, who's like carrying my brand right now. So,
amazing. I love I know aesthetic, whatever, but I love your aesthetic on your grid because it seems very cohesive. Like there's a lot of cohesion. You're using the same fonts and stuff. And
I tried really hard.
Looking good. No, you're doing amazing. Considering you've only had that Instagram for like 3 months or something, you said?
Yeah,
you're killing it. It's so good. Okay, so what are some of the logistic things that you're struggling with
mentorship? So
with developing the program.
Right now
I'm wondering if it's similar.
So I gave 3 options. It's like you can have one-off mentorship opportunities, which a lot of people didn't pick. It was like 10% maybe. Then there is the having a more long-term version, and like half the people were there, and then the other half were having group mentoring circles. So it's where people that have experience, so it would be like a theme, for example, and then people that have experience would lead that, and we have like reflective exercises or just like them honestly talking. And
are you going to start virtual spaces, or do you want to do in-person spaces?
I think both, but right now, actually, my follower base is all global. There are people in Australia, there are people in the US, there are people in the UK. There's people in Africa. So
stop it.
I've had to ask them for their time zones and locations so I can coordinate a time that like everybody can.
There's actually a tool online. I can help you with that.
Oh, really?
There is a tool online that you can do. I teach it to my office admin staff or my office admin students. I'll share it with you because you just plug in everybody's location and then it will give you red time, yellow time, green time.
I need to do
that for you. Okay. I don't have a global, well, that's not true. I do have people all over, but not Africa, Australia.
I know. I was shocked when I saw this. I'm like, what?
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. How quickly too. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So you'll start virtually, of course, and then maybe you could do some kind of a retreat or something where you pick a
I'm
country.
Hold my first event the beginning of summer.
Nice.
And so I'm still figuring out exactly what that's going to look like, but it's going to be in person in Toronto, obviously. So it will be for Toronto people. And I really want to build my community in Toronto, but there's a couple nonprofits that have reached out to me that we're probably going to collaborate on something too. So
hey,
we're a
nonprofit. We're a not-for-profit too. Yeah, we're like a baby little fetus not for profit, but any opportunity that collaboration is key. I think when you're developing these types of communities,
and I think that's how you make it. Rather than networking, it's very like relational. It's very mutual beneficial. And so how I work with folks, like I want to really make sure that it's not like I'm just taking what you can give to me. It's like how can we both support each other in like our skills or our knowledge?
Well, that's why I was really very, very, I don't know how to put this, but very strongly feeling that I didn't want it to be coaching. Like, coaching to me is like, if you follow my 90-day plan and you do this and you do that, then you'll be like me. Like,
it's like snake oil. Like, I don't like that.
No. I think mentorship is very friendship.
Yes.
Like it should be a friendship, and your mentor should have your best interest at heart. Not only professional interest, but your interpersonal interests as well as your professional interests.
They truly are your advocate.
Yeah. And I also say too, like to people that I've mentored, like I'll tell you my advice, but you take what makes sense to you and you leave what doesn't make sense to you. I'm only telling you based off of my experiences, and you can't learn your lessons through my experiences. So when I've had people come to me and, you know, making decisions about a job that they should take or a conversation they should have with their boss, or like my mentorship approach is more so around what do you want to be when you grow up? And like, how can we help you get to that place? Because so many young people are like, we've been talking about, so many young people need something to inspire them, and they need something to drive them. And they, you know, it can be so hard with the way that our economy is and politics to have something to believe in. I think we were talking about this on our Zoom call, because you were saying like, I can't believe that these people, you know, follow this person. And I'm like, but that's what resonates with them. And that's what they believe in. It's just like religion. How do you know what the right religion is? We don't know. Like there's however many different gods, and we all choose to believe in a different God. I think it's the same as the community that you fall into and the mentors that you lean into. It's you see something in them, they see something in you, and then ultimately you're supposed to support and advocate for one another.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your mentors. Like, you mentioned one, the Ice Queen. Anybody else that stands out in your mind as like a mentor to you?
I would say my aunt, but like she's not a career mentor. She's like just a life mentor. Yeah, my aunt. I love that. Yeah, always has been.
Yeah. Is she much older than you?
Yes. Yeah, she's in her early maybe she's in her mid or late 60s. What do you think? Early or mid? Yeah.
60s.
Yeah.
Okay.
60s, yeah.
Is she retired?
Yeah. She actually worked in healthcare. Yeah.
Oh, wow. What did she do in healthcare?
She was a nurse, but not like, she did work with clients, but I can't remember what kind of nurse she was.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
that intergenerational thing, right? Like having somebody's brain that you can pick who's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, bumper sticker. I think you said that in one of your reels. You were like, you want your mentor to be somebody that's been there and done that. Yes. And it's like, you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise, if the person that you lean on as your mentor is like, oh, I don't know, I've never been through anything like that before. Like, you can support each other, but to grow or to move on, like it can be very difficult if you don't have somebody to help you make those decisions.
Yeah.
And it can't be your parents.
No. It can't be your parents.
It has to be, I don't know.
Or somebody, it can't be your parents or somebody that evaluates you, or it can't be and that's why I think mentorship in universities is very tricky, because I do like the dynamic sometimes of older grad students and younger students being mentors, but they have like, you would never want your advisor to be your mentor, because like that just a position of power exists, whether you want to recognize that or not. And so, and the small community in academia, right? You're afraid what I'm going to say is going to have ramifications on me. So I think it's going to get harder with intergenerational mentorship, because the younger generation coming up will be the AI tech generation. And then if you don't jump on the AI bandwagon today, you'll be left in the dust. Just like the people when you were not alive when the internet
became into existence, but like when email, like www dot, like when that came to existence, people were either enthusiastic and willing to get into it, get an email address, you know, whatever, or people were like, I'm never getting a computer. And same thing with smartphones too, right? So I feel like that intergenerational thing now with AI, like changing the way the workforce is going to be. It will be harder for young people to find mentors who've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, unless they did hop on the AI bandwagon.
Although, okay, this might challenge that view a little bit, because I was having a conversation with my aunt actually the other day, and it was like a really different perspective change. So essentially, my dad's been having issues with high blood pressure. And so he has like a blood pressure reader at home, and she had to take him into Emerge because he couldn't breathe. And so at the hospital, the triage nurse, the numbers that I was reading, she goes like, I'm looking at your vitals physically and this is not lining up with the numbers. I'm pushing you through because something's wrong. And my aunt was like, I'm so glad that this nurse, even though like this technology is telling her one thing, she used her
nurse's intuition.
Yeah, she used her training to actually like look at the physical, like look at all these things that, you know, you've been taught before relying on technology. And it really made me think about how like my aunt has seen it all, right? Going from starting the workforce probably with like differences in technology, and how we still do need that intergenerational perspective, what it is like to not rely on technology.
The old school
we need the old school. We need them both. And because I think both
when
can
technology
exist.
Fails you, you have to fall back on the traditional.
And we have to remember like technology is human. Like we created it. There's flaws in it. And without us, we can't just completely rely on it, because like then right?
Well, I've always said like AI, and this is what I tell my students too, like, I don't think that AI should replace our brains.
No.
I think that AI should be used to work smarter, not harder, but then we'll always still need that human lens to review whatever AI has produced. To make sure that there aren't any glitches or, you know, mistakes or whatever that have been made. And speaking of which, like, we're talking about AI, but there's technology that hasn't even been invented yet that we will probably see, that your son
which
will
is
definitely
scary.
see. Yeah. And you'll be like, I don't know what that dinglehopper is. I'm just used to regular old ChatGPT. Yeah.
It's scary, because I saw a video the other day of like full on robots. Like I think it was with Elon Musk, and I was like, oh my gosh.
That's what's going to take care of me when I'm old. Robots. Yeah. For sure. Because I didn't have children. So I'm going to have to buy a Tesla robot or whatever the hell it's called. Jeez. I don't know. Karli, on this show, we do a couple of segments. And one of them is a talking point card. So maybe we can segue into a talking point card. So the themes on the card are generational, resilience, and support.
Okay. So wait, so is it
we're both going to pull, like, I'm going to give you the different themes and then you're going to pick from the theme, but which...
Let's do resilience. Let's do resilience.
Yeah. All right, let's pull from the resilience box here. I'll tell you. I don't think we've pulled from resilience in a minute. I'm going to find the little... here it is. So the themes are self-care, connected relationships, self-reflection, getting to know you, or goal setting. Want me to repeat them? Self-care, connected relationships, self-reflection, getting to know you, goal setting.
The second one, which was, I like connected relationships. Let's do that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Yellow. So you can pull a yellow one too, and we'll both ask each other one from the, see the yellow color at the top? Yeah. They're kind of mixed up. You got a yellow one? Yeah. All right. You want to go first or you want me to go first?
I'll go first. You will answer this one, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Would you rather have 10 new friends or reconnect with one old friend?
I don't even have 10 friends now.
Actually, 0.
10 new friends or reconnect with one old one.
It doesn't say about like the quality of friendship though, right?
You know what? Like, is it somebody that I like? Here's the thing that I feel about my long-term friends.
Yeah.
I have a few girlfriends in my life that space and time and life and babies, whole lives can be brought into the earth and we not see each other. But then when we reconnect, it's like we don't skip a beat.
Yeah.
So I love those moments of reconnection. You know, you text them a couple times a year and you say we should get together for drinks and we should go for dinner.
Yeah.
And then 6 months passes and you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to get together with friends. Life, right? Life. It just goes by way too fast.
Yeah.
But I think, and this is a very unorthodox answer for me, I think I would probably say 10 new friends at this stage in my life, because having 10 more people that I could bring into what it is I'm trying to create in this world.
Yeah.
Like I just registered another business as a sole proprietor. So I've got the not-for-profit and the sole proprietor business. So I think now, as introverted and whatever as I claim to be, I'm realizing that you need people. Like you need your people. Yeah. Starting a business is like buying a house. When you buy a house, you need the plumber and you need the HVAC guy and you need the roof guy and you need the driveway guy and you need the landscaper. And it's like when you start a business, you need your people. You need your brand specialist and your website developer and all those things. So yeah, having people in my life is important, I think. And I don't, because both of my parents are deceased and I don't have a relationship with my adopted siblings any longer, unfortunately. That was a very messy, horrible situation. So I don't have a family. So my family is my friends. Yeah. So I choose my family now. And I think if 10 more people came into my life and I could welcome them into my weird little family dynamic, I think that would work out okay for me.
Yeah. And isn't that great? Because now you have one, I'm one of the 10.
You are. And Richard. And Richard. Oh my goodness. Very good. Very good. Okay. What family tradition do you love?
So this is interesting because I can think of it as like my parents and me, or like
let's
Richard
do both. Let's do your parents and you and your little cute little family.
Okay. What's a family tradition? We would always go to Niagara Falls every year. So that was a fun family tradition. And then for us,
and would you go to like Ripley's Believe It or Not and like do all the little touristy things in Niagara Falls? Yeah. Nice.
And actually, probably maybe another one up there was going to Paris Fair.
We would go to my goodness,
is it even
Paris
a thing anymore?
Fair. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. I think they just did it again. The last couple of years they've done it. Paris Fair. Yeah. Oh, I love fair. Yeah. Fairs are so wholesome.
And always get the taffy and
it's so wholesome. It's just wholesome human experience.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that. What about cuisine? Like, do you have any traditional dishes that your family eats? Like,
nothing that I like to eat. No, we have very different tastes. My parents like white
nature versus nurture.
Yeah. Oh, that is a good one. That's a good one. That is a good one.
Do you like spicy food?
No, I do like Asian food though, like more. Okay. Yeah, and they don't.
It's in your DNA. I don't think you can avoid that.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about Christmas and stuff? Do you guys do any tradition, like anything over the top traditional for Christmas?
Not over the top, but like we always celebrate Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys Christmas Eve celebrators or Christmas Day celebrators?
So actually when my church was open, we would go to church and that was the Christmas Eve, which was always fun. So that was actually another one, I guess.
Do you identify as a religious person?
My mom's not going to watch this.
Mom, plug your ears.
Yeah. I definitely am spiritual, but I wouldn't say that I'm following a specific religion.
I think as similar to you, I was brought to church as a kid, but my dad always had a different perspective than my mom, where he said, why do I need somebody to tell me what to believe in? Like, why do I need to go and sit in a room and have somebody like preach to me about what I'm going to believe in? And I don't know why that always kind of stuck in my head. Like, I don't need somebody to tell me what to believe in. I think what you believe in, you feel it.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Very good. And so what about your traditions with you and your little family that you have now?
Well, because this is minus Oliver because he hasn't come in yet. But we, Richard and I, we always go to the movies. Like that's fun. Our like little thing that we do together. Yeah. But yeah, that's actually one thing because he is so small and we're still getting out of the stage of like not having nap time and not working around that.
Right.
Honestly, our tradition is like going to the park, or we have this squirrel park. We call it the squirrel park near our place.
You go on squirrel watch?
Yeah.
Oh my
squirrel
gosh.
watch. And it's always like go to Tim Hortons, have hash brown and a tea. He loves
most
steep
Canadian thing ever.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then go and squirrel watch, and we bring peanuts and feed
That's
the
so
squirrels.
funny.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You have to find, and I'm not going to remember the exact handle for it, but there's this squirrel feeder stream reel thing on Instagram where you can watch squirrels in their little like nests, and the camera's like right up to their face and you can see them like washing themselves and stuff.
Aww.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to send it to you. It's like squirrel cam or something.
Oh my
like
gosh.
Just like bird watchers is a big thing right now. Like bird watching. I don't know why I know so many people that are bird watching,
really?
but squirrel watching.
Squirrel
is also.
watching. Yeah.
We're
Nice.
just leaning back into the old traditional things that people used to do before the internet.
True.
Wholesome.
Yeah.
Wholesome traditions that we're creating in 2025. Oh, that's great. Well, okay, back to the talking points. Yes, I will pull a card. I will pull a card from, I like the generations.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. You went first last time, so I'll go first this time.
I'm scared.
Do you have any regrets?
No.
Good. That's good. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Do you want to know something very corny and very cheesy?
Yeah.
I have a tattoo that I got.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. No. I don't even know how old I was. 18, 19. And the tattoo that I have over my hip says, live with no excuses, love with no regrets.
Wow.
How
that was made
profound.
for you.
So profound.
So profound
no
at
regrets.
18.
No regrets
What
at
movie
18.
is that off of when he has it like over his
Oh my
chest?
gosh. Yeah, that chest piece. Yeah. No.
Oh my gosh.
It's just like the cliche thing. Like if you go into a girl's house and they have live, love, laugh.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like,
cannot.
is that my live, love, laugh?
Yeah.
Like, is that the thing I have permanently displayed on my body?
Yeah. At least it's in a place that's not like.
Yes. It's in a place that can't be visibly seen unless, you're up close and personal. All right.
Okay. This is a good one. I bumped the mic. How do you feel about the choices you made in school, career, and spouse?
Oh shit.
That's a biggie. Okay.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
School, career, and
spouse.
spouse. Okay, well, I'm not married, but I have a long-term partner. Okay, so school, we already kind of touched upon my experience in school. Like high school, I didn't study at all, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My undergrad originally was in English and creative writing.
Oh, really?
And then I changed to psychology.
Oh, okay.
So my undergrad is in psychology and women's studies, which I carried that with me into gerontology and social work.
Right.
So there was always like the understanding of human behavior and whatnot. But if I'm being totally honest with you, I probably would have gone into business. I think business would have been a much smarter thing, or tech. Like if I could go back and do it all over again, I wish that I would have had more of a forethought or like more foresight into emerging fields or something like that. Like healthcare I wish I just had a little bit more foresight into the emerging fields. I was so, I don't know. I was just so fixated on what I thought I should do and what I thought would be the best thing. Not what I wanted to do, but what I thought was the most admirable or whatever based off of society's standards or something. And healthcare to me, it was like, well, if I get registered with a college, then I can, work in a hospital and then I can have a pension and then I can have, I think you already alluded to this, like you're brainwashed into thinking like university or die and, get this job and stay working at this same place forever and never. And I didn't do that at all. Like I got into healthcare, but then I jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped. And I climbed the corporate ladder the way that I did because I jumped. So what was it? Do I have any regrets or how do I feel about
your choice? Yeah.
I think that I did some things right and some things wrong. I think the changing jobs frequently was a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that bless the older generation, but like the people that got into one job and stayed working at the same organization
I don't know how
for 49 years and then retired with a cake and a card and like a pen.
Yeah.
Like that's not the life for me. I get bored after 6 months of doing the same thing over and over again. And that's what happened to me in my career was I would see this job, I would apply for this job, I would get this job and I'd think this is going to be it. I'm going to be so happy doing this thing.
Yeah.
But then as soon as it lost its like newness and I wasn't getting like the dopamine fix from it anymore, it's like, can't have the same conversations over and over and over and over and over again. It's just like drives me crazy. So I think what I did for me, it was the right thing for me. It might not be the right thing for you or you or you or you or all of you. But it was the right thing for me to change and have variety every couple of years. That's why I love teaching so much, is because I get a new batch of students in every 4 months and I'm teaching different classes every 4 months and I'm teaching myself new things if it's a new course that I'm offered. So I really like that variety a lot. But yeah, I think I'm very, very proud of my 25-year career in healthcare. I don't regret it, but I wish that I had thought a little bit more outside of the box in terms of career, because I'm a very outside of the box kind of a person. And I think I wish more than anything that I had been doing something more creative and something more autonomous. And I wish I had started building something for myself sooner. For sure. And then as for, what was it?
Spouse? Yeah.
School. Spouse? No, I don't. I'm happy with my decision as also. I dated in my 20s. I had a long-term boyfriend in my early 20s, but we were off and on, very toxic, cheated on me a bajillion times. Anybody who's listening from that era knows SW very well. And he kind of ruined it for me because I wanted to do it the right way and he didn't. And then because he cheated on me so many times, I think I just felt like every guy was like that. So I went through this period of time where I was like, I'm never going to settle down ever because all guys are trash. I had like a weird situationship for a couple of years where he never called me his girlfriend, but I was his girlfriend, like Toronto, Bay Street finance. Ugh, you know. You know. And then everything changed for me spouse wise. Like everything changed for me in my 30s, where I'm not someone who ever cares to get married. That's also a hot take. Like I think there's this expectation that we're all just supposed to be out here looking for our Prince Charming so that they can put a diamond on our finger and we can live happily ever after. But another hot take, so many women that I know who are married are unhappy. And so many women that I know who are married resent their partner and, you know, resent the situation that they're in. And I just don't feel like I need a marriage certificate to define the quality of my relationship. And I think people come into our lives for a purpose and people come into our lives and they come out of our lives. And I think I've said this to Parker at a time or two where I've said, like, if something is a fuck yes, you do it. If something is a fuck no, you don't do it. Even if there's an ounce of fuck no, you should not be doing it. Pardon my French, but I'm very much of the fuck yes, fuck no mentality. And as soon as I feel an ounce of fuck no, I'm done. And I don't believe in staying in a situation just because it's comfortable or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I never want to be that person that's stuck in a situation and I don't have a choice but to stay with that person because I can't afford my rent or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to flip this back onto you. How do you feel about your education? What is it? Your school, career, and spouse. Your spouse is here, so you can't be honest about this. But we'll lean into school and career. Would you do anything differently?
No.
Good for you.
I don't think I would, honestly. And I'm not in my, am I in my career now? I don't know. I'm not in my career.
Kind of like your higher education academic career. Like very much. Very much. What kind of jobs are you applying to? Or you said you hadn't really started applying for jobs, but when you start applying to jobs?
Probably community engaged researcher. I'm not probably going to apply to any like stats or data unless it's mixed methods, and I might do that. Women's health would be a big area for me.
I have to connect you with Melinda. We did an episode with her very early on in our first season, and she's very, very passionate about women's health too. I think you guys would get along famously. She's in Toronto as well, so you guys could connect. But yeah, she's very interested in that. That's very good. All right. Well, I hate to say this. I can't believe it's already coming to an end, but we're trying to keep the episodes to about an hour and a half to just timing for things. I'm sure we could talk for 75 more years and maybe we'll have you back in the spring or in the summer. This isn't the last time that you'll hear from the well-being scientist. You can find her. Where can they find you, Karli?
Mostly Instagram, YouTube. Soon. Yeah. TikTok, I guess, but I don't really.
Do you have your website domain yet?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. We're not releasing that yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Wellness. Well, not wellness. Well-being. We've decided well-being is the much better title because of the human being experience and the collective. I love that so very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I am so happy that we were able to make this connection all based off of your reel where you said you don't need therapy. Yeah. And I feel like this is a little bit of a therapy session too. We talked about childhood and nature versus nurture, all those good things. So I think we will wrap up this episode of the All of You podcast. This is the podcast where we sit down with all of you. Thank you so much, Karli, for being here. It's been a slice. I'm supposed to remind you to hit the bell notification and like and subscribe and share. This really helps with the algorithm. We're trying to tap into this YouTube algorithm thing. Apparently, YouTube is on easy right now, and you can grow your platform relatively quickly if you do all of the things right. So check out the All of You podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and on the Olive Branch website. We'll see you next time, everybody. Bye for now.